I walked into the kitchen after a 12-hour ER shift, exhausted and expecting nothing but quiet. Then I saw it, the envelope that held Dad's surgery fund, completely empty. My heart stopped. My sister? She snorted as if it was nothing, packing for a lavish trip while Dad's life literally hung in the balance. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. How could someone I loved risk our family's safety for their own selfish plans? In the next few days, I had to uncover the truth, protect Dad, and face the impossible choice of trusting someone I never thought I could again. What would you do if your family betrayed you like this? By the time my ER shift finally ended, my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. 12 hours in the emergency room does that to you. The lights never dim. The alarms never stop. And someone is always crying somewhere down the hall. I peeled off my gloves, tossed them into the biohazard bin, and leaned against the counter for a second. My shoulders ached, and my brain felt like it was wrapped in cotton. Long night? Mark asked from the nurse's station. He already knew the answer. 3 car accidents, 1 heart attack, and a guy who thought superglue could close a chainsaw cut, I said. Mark winced. Yeah, that tracks. I grabbed my bag from the locker and changed out of my scrubs. The hospital always smelled the same: bleach, coffee, and that faint metallic scent that never really leaves your nose. Normally, after a shift like that, I'd head straight home and collapse on the couch. But tonight something sat heavy in the back of my mind. Dad's surgery. Tomorrow morning. The cardiologist had been clear. The procedure wasn't optional anymore. His heart valve had been weakening for years, and lately even walking to the mailbox left him winded. Without the surgery, things would only get worse. But at least one thing was settled. The money. Rachel and I had made sure of that months ago. The surgery fund had been sitting untouched in the family account, waiting for the hospital to schedule the date. Everything was finally lined up. I stepped outside the hospital doors into the cool night air. Our town gets quiet after midnight. Not the city kind of quiet, more like the kind where the wind moves through the trees and you can hear your own footsteps in the parking lot. My car was parked under a flickering streetlight. I slid into the driver's seat and let my head fall back against the rest for a moment. The silence felt strange after a full shift of machines and voices. I reached for my phone, mostly out of habit. There were 2 unread messages. One from a grocery store coupon app, the other from the hospital billing department. That one made me sit up straighter. I opened it. The message was short. Reminder: deposit for Robert Walker's cardiac surgery is due tomorrow morning to confirm procedure scheduling. My stomach tightened slightly. Right. The deposit. The hospital required the payment confirmation before sunrise tomorrow so the surgical team could finalize everything. It wasn't a surprise. They'd warned us weeks ago. Still, seeing the message made the whole thing feel real. Tomorrow, Dad would be lying on an operating table. I pictured him sitting in his old recliner back at the farmhouse, watching late-night westerns like he always did. He'd acted calm about the surgery. Too calm. But I knew him. He was scared. And honestly, so was I. I unlocked my phone and opened the banking app, just to double-check the account before heading home. It was something Rachel and I both had access to. A shared account we set up specifically for Dad's medical bills. The screen loaded. Then the numbers appeared. At first, I thought the app hadn't refreshed. The balance showed $128.47. I frowned. That couldn't be right. The surgery fund should have had a little over $40,000 in it. Enough to cover the deposit and the hospital costs afterward. I refreshed the screen. The number didn't change. My chest felt suddenly tight. No, that's not right. I muttered to myself. I checked again. Same number. $128.47. A cold feeling spread through my stomach. My fingers moved faster now as I tapped into the transaction history. At the top of the list was a single withdrawal. One large transfer. The date: earlier that afternoon. The amount: $40,000. For a moment my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Then I looked at the account details beside the transfer. And everything inside me went still. The withdrawal had been authorized by the secondary account holder. Rachel. My sister. I stared at the screen so long the light dimmed. Rachel hadn't mentioned anything about touching the surgery fund. Not once. We'd both agreed that money was off limits unless it went directly to the hospital. My mind started racing through possibilities. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the bank flagged something and moved the funds temporarily. Maybe Rachel had transferred it to another account for some reason. But if that was the case, why hadn't she told me? I leaned forward over the steering wheel, refreshing the page again. Same balance. Same transaction. $40,000 gone. The quiet parking lot suddenly felt too quiet. I dialed Rachel's number. The phone rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. "Hey, it's Rachel. Leave a message." I hung up without speaking. Maybe she was just busy. Maybe she didn't hear the phone. I tried again. Straight to voicemail this time. My heartbeat started picking up. Rachel wasn't exactly the most responsible person in the world, but she wasn't careless with Dad. At least she'd never been before. I opened our text thread. The last message from her was from 3 days ago. "Rachel, tell Dad I'll visit soon." That was it. Nothing about the surgery. Nothing about the money. I typed a message quickly. "Me? Rachel, did you move money from Dad's surgery account?" The little message bubble disappeared as it sent. I stared at the screen, waiting. The typing indicator never appeared. I set the phone down on the passenger seat and rubbed my eyes. Maybe there was a simple explanation. There had to be. Rachel might be impulsive sometimes, but draining Dad's surgery fund the night before his operation? That didn't make sense. Not even for her. My phone buzzed suddenly. I grabbed it instantly. Not Rachel. Just a calendar notification. Dad's surgery, 8 a.m. tomorrow. My throat felt dry. Dad was probably sitting at home right now believing everything was ready. Believing the hospital had what it needed. Believing his daughters had taken care of it. I picked up the phone again and refreshed the banking page one more time. Same number. $128.47. The streetlight outside flickered again. I stared down at the transaction details and whispered the one question that kept pushing through my mind. "Rachel, what did you do?" Because the thing I couldn't stop thinking about wasn't just the missing money. It was the timing. The withdrawal happened today. Just hours before my shift ended. Just hours before the hospital reminder message. Almost like someone knew the deadline was coming. And took the money anyway. I leaned back in the seat, staring through the windshield at the empty parking lot. My phone remained silent beside me. No call. No message. No explanation. Only one name sitting at the top of that transaction list. Rachel. And one terrible possibility slowly settling into my chest. What if the money wasn't just moved? What if it was already spent?
I didn't sleep that night.
I tried. I drove home, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of my couch staring at the phone like it might suddenly explain everything. But the screen stayed quiet. No message from Rachel. No missed calls. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the ticking clock on the wall. Every few minutes, I reopened the banking app. The balance never changed. $128.47. $40,000 had vanished from the account that was supposed to keep Dad alive. And the only person who could have moved it was my sister. Rachel. The same sister who used to sneak cookies to me when we were kids because Mom said I'd had enough. The same sister who cried harder than I did when Mom passed away. We hadn't always been perfect, but we were family. Or, at least, I thought we were. Around 2 in the morning, I tried calling again. Voicemail. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold and typed another text. Me. Rachel, I'm serious. Call me. Dad's surgery is tomorrow. The message showed as delivered. But again, nothing. The silence felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. I rubbed my forehead and opened the bank transaction again. Something about it kept bothering me. Not just the amount, the description. I hadn't paid attention to it before. But now I looked closer. Under the withdrawal line, there was a note attached to the transfer. 3 words. Global Horizons Retreat. I frowned. That didn't sound like a medical payment. It sounded like a travel company. Or one of those wellness resorts Rachel used to talk about. I pulled my laptop closer and typed the name into the search bar. The website popped up immediately. Bright photos filled the screen. Palm trees, ocean views, luxury villas with open balconies. I blinked slowly. This wasn't a hospital. This was a retreat resort. The homepage headline read, "Reconnect with yourself. Heal your body. Restore your life." I scrolled down. Meditation classes, private chefs, beach yoga sessions at sunrise. My chest tightened as I kept reading. Then I saw the pricing section. A 2-week healing retreat package. Full access to all therapies. Luxury accommodations. Price, $39,850. My stomach dropped. That number looked painfully familiar. Almost exactly the amount Rachel had withdrawn from Dad's surgery account. No, she wouldn't, I whispered. But the numbers didn't lie. The money had gone to this place. Some tropical wellness retreat. My phone suddenly buzzed on the table. I grabbed it so fast, I nearly knocked the coffee mug over. Rachel. Finally. But it wasn't a call. Just a text. 3 words. Rachel. You'll understand later. I stared at the screen in disbelief. That was it? That was her explanation? My fingers flew across the keyboard. Me. Understand what, Rachel? That was Dad's surgery fund. The typing bubble appeared for a moment, then disappeared. A few seconds later, another message arrived. Rachel. I know. I actually laughed. But it wasn't the kind of laugh that meant something was funny. It was the kind that slips out when your brain can't quite process what's happening. I called her again immediately. Voicemail. Rachel, I said after the beep, trying to keep my voice steady. You need to call me back right now. Dad's operation is in the morning. If this is some kind of mistake, we need to fix it tonight. I ended the call and stared at the phone. Nothing. No reply. No explanation. Just those 2 messages sitting there on the screen. You'll understand later. I know. I pushed my chair back and stood up, pacing the kitchen. Rachel had always been different. Free-spirited. She believed in energy healing and meditation and all those podcasts about finding your truth. But even she wouldn't take Dad's surgery money for a vacation.
Right?
I looked back at the laptop. The retreat website was still open. I scrolled again. Testimonials filled the page. People smiling on beaches. Quotes about life-changing experiences. But one line near the bottom caught my attention. Next retreat begins tomorrow. My heart skipped. Tomorrow. The same day Dad's surgery was scheduled. I checked the retreat schedule more carefully. Participants were required to check in before noon, which meant if Rachel had booked this, she would probably already be packing, or maybe even heading to the airport. My chest tightened. Had she really chosen a luxury retreat over Dad's heart surgery? It didn't make sense. Rachel loved Dad. She always had. But lately she'd been distant. Missing family dinners. Canceling visits. Always talking about needing space. I grabbed my phone again and typed another message. Me. Rachel, please tell me you didn't spend the surgery money on that retreat. The message sent. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Then my phone buzzed again. Another text from her. I opened it quickly. Rachel, it's not what you think. My frustration finally spilled over. I pressed the call button again. This time she answered. Her voice sounded calm. Too calm. Hey, she said. Hey. I repeated. Rachel, what is going on? She sighed quietly on the other end. I figured you'd notice the transaction. Notice. I almost laughed again. You drained $40,000 from Dad's surgery account. Of course I noticed. There was a pause. Then she said something that made my stomach twist. I didn't steal it. Rachel, the money is gone. I know. That money was for Dad's operation. Another pause. Then her voice softened. I'm aware of that. I pressed my hand against the kitchen counter, trying to steady myself. Rachel, the hospital needs that deposit tomorrow morning. I know, she said again. Her calmness made everything feel worse. Then why would you take it? I asked. For a moment I thought she might finally explain. But instead she said something that stopped me cold. Because Dad doesn't need that surgery. I blinked.
What?
You heard me. I felt my pulse quicken. Rachel, the cardiologist said his heart valve is failing. I know what the cardiologist said. Then why are you talking like the surgery doesn't matter? Another long pause filled the line. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. You trust hospitals too much, she said. I stared at the kitchen wall, trying to process that. What does that even mean? It means, Rachel said slowly, there's another option. My grip tightened on the phone. The retreat, I said. Yes. You spent Dad's surgery fund on a vacation resort. It's not a vacation. Rachel, their website literally shows people doing yoga on the beach. You're missing the point. I rubbed my forehead. Then explain it to me. She hesitated. Then she said something that made my chest tighten again. I'll explain when you see me. See you where? The airport, she said. My heart skipped. You're leaving tomorrow? Early flight. Rachel. Yes. My voice dropped. Please tell me you're not serious about this. Her answer came quietly. I've never been more serious about anything. The line went silent for a moment. Then she added one last sentence. And, if I'm right, Dad's life might actually depend on it. The next morning came faster than I expected. I must have dozed off for an hour or two on the couch, because when I opened my eyes the sun was already creeping through the blinds. The light felt too bright after a night spent staring at my phone. For a few seconds I forgot everything. Then the memory came rushing back. The empty account, Rachel's texts, the retreat, and the surgery deposit that was supposed to be paid today. I sat up slowly and rubbed my face. Dad didn't know any of this. As far as he understood, everything was ready for tomorrow morning. The hospital had a slot reserved. The surgeon was prepared. The paperwork had already been signed. All he had to do was show up. But now there wasn't enough money in the account to cover even the initial deposit. I grabbed my phone. Still no new messages from Rachel. The last thing she'd said was about meeting at the airport. I stared at that message for a long moment. Then I sighed and stood up. Before dealing with Rachel, there was something else I needed to do. I needed to see Dad. The farmhouse was about 20 minutes outside town. I'd driven that road so many times growing up that I barely noticed the turns anymore. Cornfields stretched out on both sides, the late morning sun washing everything in pale gold. Normally the drive calmed me down. Today it only gave my thoughts more room to spin. Rachel believed the surgery was wrong. She'd taken the money because she thought she was helping. But the doctors had been clear. Dad needed that operation. Didn't he? I pulled into the gravel driveway and parked beside Dad's old pickup truck. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. White paint slightly faded. Wooden porch steps creaking in familiar places. For a moment, seeing it made something inside me tighten. This house had held our entire childhood. Mom's laugh in the kitchen. Rachel blasting music in her room. Dad fixing something in the garage that probably didn't need fixing. It was the kind of place that felt permanent. But lately Dad didn't seem as permanent as the house. I climbed the porch steps and opened the screen door.
Dad.
I called. Out here, his voice answered. He was sitting on the porch in his usual chair. Flannel shirt, coffee mug in one hand, the morning newspaper folded beside him. The fall air had a slight chill to it, and a thin blanket rested across his lap. When he looked up and saw me, he smiled. Well, look who's up before noon, he said. I forced a small smile back. Our shift ended late. He nodded knowingly. Those doctors work you too hard. I sat down in the chair next to him. Up close, I could hear the slight wheeze in his breathing. He tried to hide it, but it was there. Another reminder of why the surgery mattered. Dad took a sip of coffee and glanced toward the driveway. Rachel coming with you today? He asked casually. My stomach tightened. No, I haven't seen her yet.
He said.
She's been busy lately. That was one way to put it. He leaned back in his chair and stretched slightly. Tomorrow's the big day, he said. The words hung in the air. I swallowed.
Yeah.
Dad stared out across the fields for a moment. You know, he said quietly, I've been thinking about that hospital food. I blinked. What about it? He chuckled softly. If it's anything like the last time I stayed overnight, I might ask the surgeon to operate faster just so I can get home sooner. I laughed a little, even though my chest felt tight. Don't worry, I said. I'll sneak you real food if it's that bad. He gave me a sideways look. You'd smuggle burgers into a cardiac ward? Absolutely. Dad shook his head with a grin. That's my girl. For a few seconds we sat there quietly. The breeze moved gently through the trees near the fence. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, guilt kept creeping into my chest. Dad believed everything was taken care of. He believed his daughters had handled the details. And technically, we had. Until yesterday. Dad suddenly looked at me more carefully. You look tired, he said. Just a long night. Something on your mind? The question caught me off guard. For a moment, I almost told him everything. The missing money, Rachel's retreat, the argument on the phone. But when I looked at his face, I hesitated. He already had enough to worry about. Just work stuff, I said. He nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure he believed me. You always carry too much of the world on your shoulders, he said. That's because someone has to. He chuckled. Well, I appreciate it. Then he added something that made my chest tighten. You girls always take care of things. I looked down at the porch floor. That sentence hit harder than he probably realized. Because right now, things were anything but taken care of. My phone buzzed quietly in my pocket. I pulled it out. A new message. Rachel. I opened it quickly. Rachel. Did you tell Dad yet? My stomach twisted. Tell him what? I typed back. Me. Tell him what exactly? The reply came almost instantly. Rachel. About the surgery. I stared at the message. What did she mean about the surgery? Before I could respond, another text appeared. Rachel. You should probably hear my side before you panic. I felt my pulse quicken. Dad noticed the change in my expression. Everything okay? He asked. I forced a small nod. Yeah, just Rachel texting. He smiled faintly. Good. I was wondering when she'd check in. If only he knew. I typed another message. Me. Then start explaining. There was a short pause. Then Rachel sent a final reply. Just one sentence. Rachel. You'll understand after we talk. I stared at the screen. The same line she'd used the night before. Dad took another sip of coffee and looked out over the fields again. You know, he said thoughtfully, Rachel always was the stubborn one. I looked up. Yeah. He nodded. When she believes something, she doesn't let go. I felt my chest tighten again. That sounded exactly like the Rachel I talked to on the phone last night. Dad glanced back at me. You two aren't fighting, are you? No, I said quickly. Not yet. But something told me that conversation at the airport was going to change everything. Dad leaned back in his chair again, looking content. Completely unaware that the surgery he believed would happen tomorrow might not happen at all. And I suddenly realized something that made my stomach twist. Rachel hadn't just taken the money. She'd taken the decision away from me. Now I had a choice to make. Tell Dad the truth, right now. Or wait until I heard what Rachel had to say. But one thing kept echoing in my mind. Rachel's message. You'll understand later. The problem was, I wasn't sure I wanted to understand. I left Dad's farmhouse just after noon. The sky had turned a pale blue, the kind that makes the whole countryside feel calm and steady. But inside the car, my thoughts were anything but steady. Rachel's last message kept circling in my head. You'll understand after we talk. I wasn't sure what she expected me to understand. Because right now, the situation looked painfully simple. Dad needed heart surgery. Rachel took the surgery money. And instead of fixing it, she was getting on a plane. The road toward the airport cut straight through the outskirts of town. Traffic was light, and most of the drive passed in silence except for the quiet hum of the engine. I tried calling the hospital once, just to check the deadline for the surgery deposit. The billing office confirmed what I already knew. We need confirmation by tonight, the woman on the phone said politely. Otherwise, the surgical slot will be released. Released. That was a careful way of saying canceled. I thanked her, hung up, and gripped the steering wheel tighter. We had less than 12 hours. Rachel had taken the money, and somehow she believed that was the right decision. The airport parking lot was half full when I arrived. A few taxis waited near the entrance, and travelers hurried across the drop-off lane dragging suitcases behind them. Rachel texted as soon as I parked. Rachel. Inside. Near gate security. I walked through the sliding glass doors and stepped into the familiar airport noise. Rolling luggage, muffled announcements, people talking over one another. It took me a moment to spot her. She was sitting at a small cafe table near the security line. A travel backpack leaned against her chair, and a carry-on suitcase stood beside her feet. Rachel looked up just as I approached. For a second, neither of us spoke. She looked exactly like she always did. Long brown hair tied loosely behind her head. A faded denim jacket. That same calm expression she wore whenever the world felt like it was falling apart. "You made it," she said. I crossed my arms. Of course I did. She gestured toward the empty chair across from her. "Sit." "I'm fine standing." Rachel studied my face for a moment, then sighed. "You're angry. You think." A couple walking past glanced in our direction before continuing toward the security line. Rachel lowered her voice slightly. "I didn't take the money to hurt Dad." "That's good to know," I said flatly. "Because right now his surgery might not happen tomorrow." "I know." Her calm tone made my frustration flare. "Rachel, you drained $40,000 from the account we set up for his heart surgery. I'm aware of the amount. And you spent it on a beach retreat." "It's not a beach retreat." I let out a slow breath. "Rachel, I looked it up." She nodded. "I figured you would." The casual way she said it made my chest tighten. "Then help me understand something," I said. "Why would you take Dad's surgery money the day before his operation?" Rachel leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on the table. "Because that surgery could kill him." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. "What?" "The valve replacement," she said quietly. "There are complications they're not telling you about." "That's not true." "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I talked to the cardiologist myself." Rachel looked down at the table for a second before speaking again. "Doctors don't always tell families everything." My patience was wearing thin. "Rachel, this isn't some conspiracy." "I know it sounds like one." "It doesn't sound like one," I said. "It sounds like you're running away from reality." Her jaw tightened slightly. "I'm not running. You're literally at an airport." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded stack of papers. Medical reports. She slid them across the table toward me. "Read those." I hesitated, then picked them up. The top page had Dad's name printed across the header. Robert Walker. Below that were test results. Numbers. Charts. Medical terms. Most of it looked familiar from the paperwork the hospital had given us weeks ago. But one line near the middle caught my attention. High surgical risk due to underlying complications. I frowned. "What is this?" Rachel tapped the page. "That's from a second opinion." "You got another doctor involved?" "Yes." "When?" "Last month." I looked up at her. "You never mentioned that." "You were already convinced the surgery was the only option." "Because that's what the cardiologist said." Rachel nodded slowly. "And the second cardiologist said something different." I felt my stomach tighten. "What exactly did they say?" Rachel leaned back in her chair. "They said Dad's heart condition might respond better to non-surgical treatment first." "Like medication?" "Like alternative therapy." I stared at her. "You mean the retreat?" "Yes." The words sat there between us. Rachel spoke carefully now. "They specialize in cardiac recovery programs. Meditation, stress treatment, diet therapy." "Rachel," I interrupted. "Just listen." I shook my head. "You spent $40,000 on yoga." "It's not yoga. It's a wellness retreat. It's a treatment program." I rubbed my temples. "Dad needs a surgeon, not a beach vacation." Rachel's voice softened slightly. "You didn't see what I saw." "What did you see?" She looked straight at me. "His fear." That caught me off guard. Rachel continued quietly. "Dad isn't telling you how scared he is." "He's nervous," I admitted. "Anyone would be."
"No," she said.
"He's terrified." I didn't respond, because part of me knew she wasn't entirely wrong. Rachel leaned forward again. "Last month he told me something." "What?" "He said if the surgery goes wrong, he doesn't want his last memory to be a hospital ceiling." My chest tightened slightly. "That doesn't mean we cancel the operation." "I didn't cancel it. You took the money." Rachel paused. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "I moved the surgery date." My head snapped up. "You did what?" "I called the hospital." "You're not even the primary contact." "I'm still listed on his records." I stared at her in disbelief. "Rachel, you had no right." "I had every right to try protecting him." "From what?" "The The doctors? From a decision he felt forced into. My thoughts raced. If the surgery date had been moved, that explained why she wasn't panicking about the payment deadline. But it also meant something else. Rachel, I said slowly, when did you reschedule it? Her answer came quietly. 2 weeks from now. The airport announcement system chimed overhead. A boarding call echoed through the terminal. Rachel glanced toward the security line. That's my flight. You're still leaving? Yes. For 2 weeks. She nodded. I'll be back before the new surgery date. My frustration surged again. You think Dad will just sit at home waiting while you test a beach therapy program? Rachel stood up and grabbed her backpack. I think he deserves the chance to try something less dangerous first. And if it doesn't work? Her expression softened slightly. Then we still have the surgery. I watched as she lifted her suitcase handle. The boarding line was already forming behind her. Rachel, I said quietly. She stopped. If this goes wrong, if Dad gets worse. I know, she said softly. Then she added one last sentence before turning toward security. But what if the doctors are wrong? I stood there in the middle of the airport terminal watching my sister disappear into the security line. And for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't completely sure she was crazy. I didn't go home after leaving the airport. Instead, I sat in the car for almost 20 minutes with the engine off, staring through the windshield at the parking garage wall. Rachel's words kept replaying in my head. He's terrified. Part of me wanted to dismiss it. Dad had always been the strongest person I knew. The kind of man who fixed his own roof at 70 and refused help carrying groceries even when he was clearly out of breath. But fear works quietly. Sometimes you don't notice it until someone points it out. I finally started the car and pulled out of the lot. There was only one place I needed to go. Back to Dad's house. The drive felt shorter this time, though the thoughts in my head felt heavier. Rachel had moved the surgery date without telling me. She had spent the money. And now she was halfway to some tropical retreat convinced she'd saved Dad's life. But the question that wouldn't go away was the one she'd planted. What if Dad didn't actually want the surgery? When I pulled into the driveway again, his truck was gone. For a moment I frowned. Dad rarely left the house these days unless he had to. Then I noticed the barn door open slightly. I walked around the side of the house and found him inside the barn workshop. The smell of sawdust and oil hit me the moment I stepped in. Dad stood at his old wooden workbench, tightening a bolt on something that looked like it had once been part of a lawn mower. He glanced up when he heard my footsteps. Well, look who's back already, he said with a small smile. I forgot something, I replied. Your sanity? Maybe. He chuckled and wiped his hands on a rag. You look like someone who's been arguing with your sister. That caught me off guard. How'd you guess? Dad leaned against the bench. You two only get that serious look on your faces when you're disagreeing about something important. I crossed my arms and leaned against a wooden post. Do we look that obvious? Oh yeah. He nodded toward the small refrigerator in the corner. There's iced tea in there if you want some. I grabbed a bottle and took a long drink. The barn was quiet except for the occasional creak of the wood frame shifting in the breeze. Dad watched me for a moment. All right, he said finally. What's going on? I hesitated. Rachel had asked if I'd told him yet. And standing there in the barn, I realized something. I didn't want Dad to find out from a hospital phone call or a billing office. If he was going to hear the truth, it needed to come from me. Rachel took the surgery money, I said. Dad blinked. What? She transferred it out of the account yesterday. He stared at me for a moment, as if he was trying to decide whether I was joking. That's not funny, he said quietly. I'm not joking. The silence that followed felt heavy. Dad slowly set the rag down on the workbench. Why would she do that? She thinks the surgery is too risky. He frowned. Risky? She got a second opinion from another doctor. Dad crossed his arms, leaning back against the bench. And what did this other doctor say? That there might be other treatments to try first. Like what? I hesitated. A retreat program. Dad stared at me. You mean like a vacation? Not exactly. He shook his head slowly. Your sister always did like strange ideas. I watched his face carefully. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look surprised. Just thoughtful. That reaction confused me. You're not mad? I asked.
Dad shrugged slightly.
I'm sure she had her reasons. She spent $40,000, Dad. I know how much it was. The calmness in his voice made me pause. Did you know about this? I asked slowly. Dad looked away for a moment. Not exactly. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? He sighed and pulled out a chair near the workbench. Sit down for a minute. I sat across from him. The late afternoon light filtered through the barn window, casting long shadows across the floor. Dad rested his hands on the table. Rachel came by a few weeks ago, he said. About the surgery? He nodded. She asked me how I felt about it. And what did you tell her? Dad rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I told her the truth. My chest tightened. What truth? That I'm scared. Hearing him say it out loud felt strange. Dad had always been honest, but he rarely admitted fear. She asked if I wanted the surgery, he continued. And Dad looked directly at me. I told her I didn't know. That answer hit me harder than I expected. You didn't know? I trust the doctors, he said. But I also know my body isn't 20 years old anymore. I stayed quiet. Dad continued slowly. They said there's a chance things could go wrong.
There's always a chance, I said.
I know. But the surgery could save your life. It could, he agreed. Then he added something that made my throat tighten. Or it could shorten it. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Finally, I asked the question that had been building in my chest since leaving the airport. Dad, if it were completely your choice, would you still do the surgery? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the barn wall for a long moment. I want more time, he said quietly. The words landed heavily in the room. That's the point of the surgery, I said gently. He nodded. But I also want that time to feel like living. I looked down at the wooden table. Rachel's words echoed again in my mind. He's terrified. Dad spoke again. Rachel said there might be another option. The retreat? Yes. What did you tell her? Dad smiled faintly. I told her I'd think about it. I felt a knot form in my stomach. So, she thought she was helping. Probably. I rubbed my forehead. She moved the surgery date too. Dad looked up. She did. 2 weeks. He leaned back in the chair and let out a slow breath. Well, that explains something. What? He pointed toward the house. The hospital called this morning. My head snapped up. They did. Left a voicemail asking if I wanted to confirm the new appointment. My pulse quickened. And what did you tell them? Dad gave a small shrug. I haven't called them back yet. I stared at him. You haven't decided? Not yet. The late afternoon sun dipped lower outside the barn window. The room filled with warm golden light. Dad leaned forward slightly. Let me ask you something, he said. Okay. If you were in my shoes, would you want the surgery tomorrow? The question caught me completely off guard, because for the first time since all of this started, I realized I wasn't entirely sure what the right answer was. I left the barn feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because at least I knew Dad wasn't hiding anything from me. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't blindly trusting the hospital either. But heavier because now I carried the responsibility of deciding how to act, knowing Rachel had already made her move. The drive back to town was quiet. The cornfields stretched endlessly on either side, and the low afternoon sun painted everything in gold. I kept replaying Dad's question in my mind. If you were in my shoes, would you want the surgery tomorrow? I didn't have an answer. I pulled into the hospital parking lot and sat in my car for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel. The sterile smell of antiseptic and the faint hum of the HVAC system in the building nearby crept in through the rolled-down windows. I reached for my phone. Time to call the billing office again. To confirm, to negotiate, to fix what Rachel had disrupted. The line connected after a few rings. Hello, Robert Walker's account. This is Clara. How can I help you? Hi, this is Emily Walker, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm checking on the deposit for my father's surgery. Clara typed something on her end. Let me check. Yes, it appears the payment hasn't been received. The surgery slot is still reserved for tomorrow, but without confirmation, it may be released by the end of the day. I exhaled sharply. Is there any way to extend that deadline? She hesitated. Usually we need the deposit, but I can note the account and request an extension. Can you provide a reason for the delay? I paused. That was harder than I thought. How do you explain that your sister thinks a tropical retreat might save your father more than a $40,000 heart surgery? There's been a family emergency, I finally said. We're handling it.
Can you please note that?
Noted, Clara said. I'll escalate it. Please call back within 24 hours with confirmation. I hung up and sat back, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. One part of me wanted to scream at Rachel over the phone. The other part of me understood why she'd done it. Dad had been terrified. And maybe, just maybe, Rachel's gamble could work. I took a deep breath and started walking toward the hospital lobby. The automatic doors slid open, and the smell hit me, the same sterile mix I'd worked in during my ER shifts. Seeing it from the patient side was different, though. It made everything feel smaller somehow, more fragile. I stopped near the reception desk, trying to steady my nerves. The receptionist smiled politely. Can I help you? Yes, I said. I'm here to see the cardiology department. I need some clarification on my father's surgery. She picked up the phone. Dr. Morales is available in a few minutes. Please take a seat. I sat down in one of the chairs, fidgeting with my phone. Every few minutes, I glanced at it, half expecting a message from Rachel. Finally, a nurse came out. Emily Walker? Dr. Morales is ready for you. I followed her down the hallway, heart pounding in a way I hadn't felt during any of my ER shifts. Stepping into the doctor's office was surreal. The walls were lined with medical charts, and the faint smell of antiseptic lingered. Dr. Morales looked up from her notes. Emily, have a seat. Thank you, I said, sitting across from her. I understand you're calling about your father's procedure scheduled for tomorrow? Yes, I said quickly. I need some clarification. There's been a change. She raised an eyebrow. A change?
Yes.
There's been a delay. And I wanted to know what options are available. I mean, what are the risks if the surgery is postponed? Dr. Morales leaned back. Delaying a valve replacement can increase risks, yes. But it depends on your father's current condition. His tests are stable. His vitals are okay. A short postponement isn't catastrophic. I exhaled. Okay, that's a relief. Dr. Morales continued. I do need to know exactly when you plan to confirm the deposit. That determines whether we can hold the surgical slot. I nodded. Understood. I'll make arrangements today. Her phone buzzed quietly, and she glanced at it. Emily, may I ask, what prompted this call? I hesitated. Could I tell her Rachel had taken the money? That my father was terrified of the surgery? That we were weighing another option? Family considerations, I said finally. We're trying to make the best choice for my father. She nodded slowly, sensing I couldn't or wouldn't say more. Then I'll note that, and you should call me before the end of the day. The slot is still technically available, but it cannot be held indefinitely. I thanked her and left the office, heart still racing. Outside, the warm sunlight felt strange after the quiet, tense air of the hospital. I got back in the car, my hands still trembling slightly. Rachel's words haunted me again. What if the doctors are wrong? I stared at the steering wheel. My mind ran through every scenario. Dad could have the surgery tomorrow. He could be terrified the entire time. He could be fine. Or the surgery could go wrong. And Rachel had acted on her instinct. She'd trusted her judgment over mine. Over the doctors. Over the system. Was that reckless? Or was it the first time anyone had listened to what Dad actually wanted? I didn't have an answer yet. The phone buzzed. It was Rachel. Rachel, call me when you're done. I stared at it for a long moment. My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to scream.
Part of me wanted to cry.
And part of me just wanted to know what she was thinking, what she had seen that I hadn't. I pressed the green call button. Emily. Her voice sounded calm, but there was something in it serious, urgent. Yeah, I said. I just got off the hospital call. The slot is still there, but it can't be held forever. I know, she said quietly. I swallowed. Rachel, you're really making me nervous. I didn't mean to. I needed you to see things from my perspective before deciding anything. I felt a wave of frustration and fear wash over me. I don't know what perspective that is. You took the money. You're on a plane halfway across the country. Dad doesn't even know yet. I know. She paused. And I'm sorry for that. But I promise if you hear me out, you'll understand why I did it. Her words hung between us. I could hear the faint hum of airport noise in the background. Somewhere nearby, people were rushing to gates, dragging luggage, talking on phones. But on this call, it was just us. I swallowed again, feeling the weight of the day pressing down. Okay, I said slowly. I'll listen. But we need to figure out what's next for Dad, now. Rachel's voice softened. I know. And we will. I just wanted you to see what I saw before making any moves. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, heart still racing. Then start talking, Rachel. Because time is running out. There was silence for a moment. And I realized for the first time since this all started that the rest of the day might change everything. Because after this conversation, nothing would ever feel the same. And I had no idea if that change would save Dad or break what was left of our family. The next day, I found myself standing outside the retreat gates, staring at the warm sunlight bouncing off the white sand and turquoise water beyond the fence. It was beautiful in a way that made me want to hate it, and Rachel. But the truth was, the place had a calming energy, the kind of calm I didn't feel in a hospital hallway. My hands were clammy as I approached the front desk. A young woman greeted me with a cheerful smile. Can I help you? She asked. Yes, I said, trying to steady my voice. I'm here to see a participant, Emily Walker. She's with the program today. The woman nodded. Let me check. Yes, I see her. She's in the main relaxation area. Follow me. I followed her down a winding path lined with palm trees, the salty scent of the ocean drifting in. Every step made my stomach twist tighter. I didn't know what I'd find when I saw Rachel. Would she be smug? Confident? Afraid? The relaxation area opened up before me. A large open-air space with soft cushions, flowing curtains, and people seated quietly, some meditating, some journaling. And there she was, Rachel, sitting cross-legged, serene as ever, eyes closed. I hesitated for a moment, then walked closer. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Dad. Emily, be careful. I trust you to protect me. I swallowed hard and slid the phone back into my pocket. Rachel opened her eyes when she sensed me. You came, she said softly. I had to, I said. We need to talk. About Dad. She nodded, motioning for me to sit on the cushion beside her. I sank down, trying not to fidget. I know you're mad, she said quietly. And I understand if you are. I am, I admitted. But I'm also confused. You took the money, delayed the surgery, and now you want me to trust you. Rachel looked out at the ocean for a moment. I needed you to see why I did it. Dad's surgery isn't guaranteed. There's risk, yes. But what I saw was his fear. And I realized no one had really asked him what he wanted. I felt a lump form in my throat. We all assumed he wanted the surgery. The doctors told us it was necessary. We were protecting him. I know, she said gently. But protecting him doesn't always mean doing what seems safest. Sometimes it means listening. I looked at her, searching her face for any sign that she'd gone too far. But all I saw was concern, deep, raw concern for our father. He's terrified, she continued. He doesn't want to spend his last moments in a hospital room, hooked to machines. And he's been scared to tell anyone because he didn't want to burden us. My chest tightened. I hadn't realized it before. Rachel wasn't reckless. She wasn't selfish. She was listening to him in a way none of us had. Rachel, did you talk to him? I asked quietly. Yes, she said. I asked him if he wanted the surgery tomorrow. And he hesitated. He wanted time. Time to process. Time to try something less invasive first. I sat back, absorbing her words. It made sense. And yet, the anxiety clawing at my chest didn't disappear. So, you spent $40,000 on a retreat because he's scared? Yes, she admitted. And because there's a program here that could help him stabilize, reduce stress on his heart, and potentially make the surgery safer when it happens. I glanced around at the space. People meditating, journaling, taking quiet walks along the shaded paths. The idea seemed plausible, maybe even wise. But I still felt my frustration simmering beneath the surface. "You didn't tell me," I said softly. "You didn't give me a choice." "I know," she said, looking down at her hands. "I acted fast because I saw the urgency. I know it looks like I took control, but I was trying to protect him in the only way I could think of at the moment." I took a deep breath. "Rachel, this could work, but it could also fail. And if it fails, Dad's surgery is delayed, and we risk everything." "I know," she whispered. "And that's why I needed you here. I can't do this alone. I need your support, and I need you to understand what I saw before you judge me." I studied her for a long moment. She wasn't the reckless sister I thought she was. She was the sister who had grown up with me, who had loved Dad fiercely, and who had made a decision based on instinct and observation. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll try to understand. But we need a plan. Dad can't be left in limbo." Rachel nodded. "Agreed. That's why I contacted the retreat doctors. They're monitoring him remotely. They've reviewed his medical records. And they have a step-by-step plan to stabilize him before we even consider the surgery." I felt some of the tension in my shoulders ease. "And the surgery will still happen," Rachel said firmly. "But on terms he can live with, not in fear." I leaned back, letting out a long breath. The ocean breeze swept through the open space, warm and calming. "You really think this will work?" I asked. Rachel looked me in the eyes. "I don't know. But I do know this. We'll never know if we don't try. And if we can give Dad even a little peace before facing the hospital, isn't that worth it?" I didn't answer immediately. My thoughts raced. The risk, the money,
The trust.
and above all, the possibility that we might actually be doing the right thing. Finally, I said, "Okay, let's try it. Together." Rachel's lips curved into a faint smile. "Thank you." We sat there in silence for a moment, letting the calm of the retreat wash over us. The waves lapped softly against the shore, and the warm sunlight danced across the cushions. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Because maybe, just maybe, we could do this right. And maybe Dad would finally feel like he had a choice. I glanced at Rachel. "But next time, let's talk before you spend $40,000. She laughed quietly.
Deal.
We both knew it wasn't really about the money. It was about trust. And after everything, rebuilding that trust was going to be the hardest part. But standing there, in that quiet, sunlit space, I realized one thing. For Dad, it might just be worth it. I didn't expect to feel nervous driving Dad to the retreat the next morning. He sat in the passenger seat of my car, hands folded on his lap, eyes staring out the window at the same cornfields we'd driven past hundreds of times. The quiet hum of the engine filled the space between us, punctuated only by the occasional chirp of birds or distant tractor. "Are you sure about this, Emily?" he asked softly, his voice carrying that familiar tremor I'd learned to recognize over the years. "I am," I said, trying to keep my tone calm and steady. "Rachel has done her research, and the program here is designed to help you. Think of it as a head start before the surgery." He nodded slowly, but didn't speak. I glanced at him. The worry in his eyes was subtle, but it was there, lurking behind the calm exterior he always tried to show. I squeezed his hand lightly, silently letting him know I was with him. When we arrived, the retreat looked even more serene than I had imagined from yesterday. Whitewashed buildings with open-air courtyards, the ocean stretching out behind them, and gentle waves providing a soundtrack that felt almost too perfect for the situation. A staff member approached us with a warm smile. "Welcome back. Are you Emily's father?" "Yes," Dad replied quietly.
Great.
"We've prepared your initial evaluation session. Please follow me." I helped Dad out of the car and walked beside him, keeping my hand lightly on his back. The fear I'd seen in him yesterday was still there, but now it was mixed with curiosity. The evaluation room was small but welcoming. Soft, natural light filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow. Rachel had already left a few notes for the staff about Dad's medical history, and they had all his test results on hand. "Mr. Walker, we'll start with some simple assessments today," said the retreat doctor, a calm woman named Dr. Simmons. "We'll measure stress levels, heart function, and discuss goals for the program." Dad shifted slightly in his chair. "Do I have to do anything strenuous?" "Nothing strenuous," Dr. Simmons assured him. "We're focusing on gentle, safe techniques, breathing, meditation, nutrition adjustments. It's all designed to support your heart." I watched Dad take a deep breath, trying to absorb the instructions. Even now, he seemed hesitant, like he was stepping into unfamiliar territory. But he didn't resist, and that was progress. After the initial assessment, Dr. Simmons led Dad through a brief breathing exercise. I could see the tension in his shoulders slowly ease as he followed her instructions. "You're doing very well," she said. "Just focus on your breath and let your mind settle." Dad exhaled slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Feels weirdly calming." I chuckled quietly. Sometimes weird is good. After the session, we walked outside to the courtyard. The ocean breeze brushed against our faces, carrying the faint scent of salt and sand. Dad leaned against the railing, watching the waves. "You're actually enjoying this, aren't you?" I asked softly. He turned to me, a faint grin appearing. "I didn't expect to, but yes. It's peaceful. And honestly, I feel less anxious than I thought I would." I felt a pang in my chest, a mix of relief and surprise. Part of me had been skeptical, worried that Rachel's gamble might backfire. But seeing Dad genuinely relax made me question my own assumptions. We spent the afternoon moving through gentle stretching exercises, a guided nutrition session, and a quiet journaling period. Dad was hesitant at first, but began participating fully, answering questions and noting his own observations. During a short break, he turned to me. "Emily, I think Rachel might have been right." I looked at him, surprised. "You think?" "Yes," he said slowly. "I was terrified yesterday. But after trying these exercises, I feel more in control, less trapped by fear." A lump formed in my throat. Hearing Dad admit that he had been scared and that he now felt a glimmer of hope was more emotional than I expected. We sat quietly on a bench overlooking the ocean, letting the sounds of the waves fill the space between us. The retreat staff moved calmly around the area, checking on other participants, but for a moment, it felt like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us. "I'm glad you're giving this a chance," I said softly. "Even if I didn't understand it at first, seeing you relax, that matters." Dad reached out and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for trusting Rachel. I know it wasn't easy." "I didn't completely trust her," I admitted. "But seeing you here actually participating, I'm starting to see why she did it." He smiled faintly, the kind of quiet, sincere smile that made my chest ache in a good way. Later, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting warm golden light across the courtyard, Dad attended a guided meditation session with Rachel's remote check-ins. I watched him from a distance, noting the subtle relaxation in his movements, the softening of his expression, the way he wasn't gripping the chair anymore. For the first time since the surgery had been scheduled, I felt a fragile sense of hope. But hope came with its own tension. I knew the surgery was still coming. The money Rachel had spent, the retreat, the delay, it was all temporary. One misstep and Dad could be back at square one. And worse, one mistake could cost more than time. I glanced at Dad again. He closed his eyes during the meditation, inhaling and exhaling slowly, completely immersed in the session. I whispered under my breath, mostly to myself, "We'll do everything we can to keep you safe, Dad." The retreat staff moved on, gently guiding other participants, leaving us a brief moment of quiet. I could hear the waves, feel the breeze, and see Dad's shoulders finally relax. Somewhere deep down, I realized that Rachel's actions, chaotic as they seemed, had given him the space to be honest with himself. And in turn, his honesty was slowly giving me a new perspective. A perspective that might just make the surgery work, not as a forced necessity, but as a choice Dad was ready to make. For now, that fragile hope felt like a lifeline. And I clung to it as the sun dipped lower, painting the courtyard in soft oranges and golds, knowing that tomorrow would bring more challenges, more decisions, and more chances to protect the man who had always protected us. Because in the end, it wasn't about the money, the schedule, or even the retreat. It was about him. And for the first time in days, I felt like we were finally doing something right. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The sunlight spilling through the window felt unusually warm, almost comforting. But comfort was the last thing I expected to feel this week. Dad was still at the retreat, fully immersed in the program Rachel had enrolled him in. The thought of him relaxing, breathing, and finally feeling like he had some control over his health was oddly reassuring, but also nerve-wracking. I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was about to happen. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through my phone. Messages from Rachel were few. She had promised to let the program take the lead and check in with me when necessary. I glanced at the clock, too early for most of Dad's usual calls. Then my phone rang. The caller ID flashed an unfamiliar number. My heart jumped. "Hello." I answered cautiously. Emily said a calm, professional voice. "This is Dr. Simmons, from the retreat program." I sat up straighter. "Yes, Dr. Simmons. Is everything okay?" "There's been a development regarding your father's assessment yesterday," she said. "I wanted to speak with you directly before any decisions are made." I gripped my coffee cup tightly. "Of course. What's going on?" Dr. Simmons paused for a moment, then said, "During the initial stress evaluation, your father exhibited an irregularity in his heart rhythm, something we didn't expect given his previous tests. It's not critical at this moment, but it requires immediate monitoring and potential adjustment of the program." My stomach twisted. Immediate monitoring? Is he in danger? "No," Dr. Simmons reassured me quickly. "He's stable. But we want to be proactive to prevent any complications. We need you to authorize a few adjustments to his daily routine and medications while he's here." I exhaled, trying to steady myself. "Okay, what kind of adjustments?" "More frequent heart checks, modified breathing exercises, and a slight change in the diet regimen," she explained. "It's simple, but it requires your consent since it involves personal health data." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yes, I authorize it. Whatever you need to do to keep him safe."
"Thank you," she said.
"I also want to emphasize that while this is not urgent, it's a chance to catch potential issues before they escalate. Your father's engagement with the program is excellent, and we want to maintain that momentum." "Understood," I said, my voice softening. I felt a mix of relief and unease. Relief that he wasn't in immediate danger, and unease because the week had already been a whirlwind of uncertainty. Dr. Simmons continued, "One more thing. I need to ask if you'd like a detailed update after each session. Some families find it helpful, while others prefer to give the participant space."
I thought about it.
Dad needed space, yes. But I also needed to know what was happening with his heart. "Please send me daily updates," I said finally. "Even brief notes." "Of course," she said warmly. "I'll ensure you're included in all communications." I hung up and sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on me. I had Rachel's trust, Dad's trust, and now the retreat's guidance. Every decision I made mattered more than ever. My phone buzzed again, a message from Rachel. "Rachel, call me when you can. Important update from the retreat." I sighed, knowing this was going to be another tense conversation. I dialed her number. "Emily," she answered, her voice calm but serious. "I just spoke with Dr. Simmons. Did she call you first?" "Yes," I said. "She did. What's the update you mentioned?" Rachel paused. "They noticed a minor arrhythmia during yesterday's evaluation. Not critical, but enough that they want to adjust his sessions." I rubbed my forehead. "I just authorized that." "I know," Rachel said. "I wanted you to hear it from me too. And there's more." I felt a pang of anxiety. "More?" "Yes," she said quietly. "They're recommending one additional test before we continue the program fully. It's non-invasive, but it will give a clearer picture of his heart's current state. They want to schedule it this afternoon." I swallowed hard. "Do we do it?" Rachel's voice softened. We do it. I've already cleared the funds and coordinated with the staff. Dad trusts the team, and this will ensure the program is safe and effective. I exhaled slowly. Okay, I trust you. I don't want to make a mistake. You won't, she reassured me. We're all working together for him. That's what matters. We hung up, and I sat in silence for a few minutes, letting the news sink in. The retreat was doing exactly what it promised, keeping Dad safe, monitoring him carefully, and giving him a chance to feel in control. But the suspense wasn't over. Every update, every test, every adjustment carried a small weight of uncertainty. What if the program uncovered something serious? What if the surgery timeline had to shift again? I glanced at the calendar. Even with Rachel's careful planning, time was ticking. Dad's surgery was still scheduled, albeit delayed. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that each decision we made now could change the outcome in ways we couldn't predict. I reached for my phone again. A message from Dad appeared. Emily, everything's fine. Feeling better already. Trust Rachel. Trust the process. I smiled faintly, the warmth of his words easing the tension in my chest. At least for now, he was calm. At least for now, he trusted us both. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. The sunlight was brighter now, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. My mind replayed the events of the past week, the money, the flight, the retreat, the calls, the updates. It had all been chaotic, but somehow it was working. For the first time in days, I allowed myself a small, fragile hope. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of a series of tests, not just for Dad, but for all of us. Because the truth about fear, family, and trust wasn't going to reveal itself easily. And the next update, the next call could change everything. I didn't expect a letter to arrive that afternoon. The retreat had been keeping me updated by email, but a physical envelope with Dad's handwriting on it felt different. Personal, intimate, heavy with unspoken meaning. I sat on the porch steps, the warm breeze brushing against my face, and held the envelope in my hands. My fingers lingered on the paper, tracing the familiar loop of Dad's handwriting. It was neat, careful, just like he had always written, but there was something in the way the letters leaned slightly to the right, a hint of urgency I hadn't noticed before. I tore it open slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded with precision, as if every crease mattered. Emily, it began. If you are reading this, I am at the retreat, and I hope this finds you calm. I wanted to put into words what I haven't been able to say out loud. I swallowed, my heart tightening. I am scared. I've always been scared of hospitals, of procedures, of losing control. And while I trust the doctors, I've realized I need to face this on my own terms. Rachel understood that. I didn't, but she did. And she acted to give me that space. I paused, letting the words sink in. My mind flashed back to the chaos of the last few days. The stolen surgery money, Rachel's flight, my panic, and Dad's quiet, terrified face in the barn. I know you're frustrated with her, and maybe with me too. I am sorry for the worry I've caused. But please understand, this retreat is helping me feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Peace. Control. A sense that I can make a choice. I took a deep breath. His words were so measured, so deliberate, yet brimming with vulnerability. I could hear his voice in every line, the tremor in his tone, the hesitation before each admission. Emily, I need you to trust both of us. Rachel saw something I couldn't articulate. And now, with your support, I feel like I might finally face the surgery without fear. Please, don't let anger blind you. Let's work together. For me. For all of us. Tears pricked my eyes. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I exhaled slowly. I set the letter down and leaned back against the porch railing, letting the warm air wash over me. The words were simple, yet they carried more weight than any conversation we'd had. Dad had been honest, raw, and vulnerable in a way that made everything else, the money, the delays, the arguments, fade into the background. My phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. Rachel, did you get the letter? I typed back quickly.
Yes,
I'm starting to understand. Her reply came almost instantly.
Good.
That's all I wanted. I looked down at Dad's handwriting again. Each word seemed to echo in my mind, reinforcing a lesson I hadn't fully grasped. Fear can be paralyzing, but trust and understanding can be even more powerful. I remembered the moment in the barn when he admitted he was terrified. The conversation at the retreat with Rachel. The check-ins from Dr. Simmons. All of it was leading to this, a fragile, growing sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could navigate this without breaking him or ourselves. I leaned forward and picked up my phone, calling the retreat to check on the afternoon session. Emily. Dr. Simmons answered. Her voice sounded calm, but slightly tense. We're about to start his guided therapy session. I wanted to confirm you received his consent and the letter? Yes, I said. Everything is clear. Excellent. He's responding well to the initial adjustments. But this session is critical. It's designed to help him process his fears directly. I think you'll be encouraged by the outcome. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Thank you. I appreciate everything you're doing. After hanging up, I sat back on the porch. The ocean breeze from the retreat's distant waves seemed to reach me even here, through the phone connection and the quiet hum of the day. I realized that the retreat wasn't just helping Dad physically, it was giving him emotional space, and in turn, it was teaching me patience and perspective. I looked at the letter again. A single line stood out more than the rest. Please, don't let anger blind you. Let's work together. I whispered it aloud, almost as if speaking it would make it real. Don't let anger blind you. Work together. The words resonated in a way that made my chest ache with relief and responsibility. Dad's fear, Rachel's impulsive actions, my own panic, they were all part of a complex puzzle, and for the first time, I could see the image forming. I knew the coming days would still be tense. There would be decisions, updates, and moments of doubt. The surgery was inevitable, and the stakes were high. But for the first time, I felt aligned with Dad and Rachel, moving in the same direction rather than against each other. I stood up from the porch, holding the letter close to my chest. It wasn't just paper. It was trust. It was a bridge. And it was a reminder that no matter how chaotic the past week had been, communication and honesty could guide us through the uncertainty. As I folded the letter carefully and set it on the table, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Rachel. Rachel, be ready for the next update. Things are moving faster than we expected. I smiled faintly, a mixture of anxiety and hope washing over me. I whispered to myself, all right, Dad, let's face this together. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt like we might just make it through. Because the letter hadn't just told me what Dad felt. It reminded me why we fight, why we care, and why family, even in chaos, can be stronger than fear itself. The morning sun filtered through my kitchen window, soft and warm, but my mind felt anything but calm. I had just finished my first coffee and was scrolling through updates from the retreat when my phone buzzed with a video call. The caller ID flashed Rachel's name. Emily, she said as soon as I answered, her voice a mix of excitement and concern. You need to see this. See what? I asked, heart already racing. I can't explain over the phone. Just watch. She held her phone camera, so I could see Dad sitting in the main therapy room, surrounded by the retreat staff. He looked calmer than I'd seen him in days, a slight smile tugging at his lips. But that wasn't the revelation. It was the woman beside him, a nutritionist I hadn't met, holding a small tablet with test results. Dad's eyes lit up as she spoke, nodding at what she was showing. Rachel whispered something to me on the call, but I couldn't catch it over the gentle background hum of the room. Emily, look closer, she urged. I squinted at the screen. At first, it was just numbers and charts, but then I noticed a pattern. My chest tightened. It looked like Dad's heart metrics were improving, significantly, faster than anyone had predicted. Is this real? I whispered, disbelief threading my voice. Rachel nodded. The retreat program is actually stabilizing him. His arrhythmia is less pronounced. They're saying the combination of stress therapy and nutrition adjustments is helping more than expected. I sank into my chair, gripping the edge. Relief battled with disbelief. I had worried every step of the way that delaying the surgery would worsen his condition, but here was proof that, Somehow, this unconventional approach was working. "Can I talk to him?" I asked quietly. Rachel held the phone closer. "Go ahead."
Dad.
I said, my voice trembling slightly. He turned to the camera, his smile widening just a fraction. "Emily," his voice was soft but steady. "I feel better, calmer, like I can breathe again." I felt tears prick my eyes.
"I'm so glad, Dad."
"Really? I know you and Rachel had a hard time understanding each other," he said, looking at me directly through the screen. "But I see now that both of you care about me. I needed both perspectives, and I needed to feel safe making a choice." My throat tightened, a mix of relief and lingering guilt washing over me. I
wanted to protect you, Dad."
I didn't know how to trust Rachel's methods. He smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Emily, I understand. I felt that panic too. But sometimes the path to the right choice isn't obvious. And I'm glad you both took it." Rachel's voice broken softly. "We're not done yet. There are still a few days of monitoring, and then we'll reassess for the surgery. But this is a breakthrough. He's responding better than the doctors initially predicted." I exhaled, a shudder running through me. I can't believe this. I honestly thought we were running out of options." "You thought the worst," Dad said, a hint of humor in his tone. "And maybe we all did. But this is a start. A real start." I glanced at Rachel. "You were right," I admitted quietly. "I doubted you, but this is incredible." She smiled faintly, her eyes softening. "It wasn't about being right, Emily. It was about Dad, and giving him a choice he could live with." I looked back at Dad, whose posture had shifted subtly, more relaxed, shoulders less tense. The staff were moving quietly around him, guiding him through a gentle meditation exercise. He closed his eyes, inhaling and exhaling deeply, and I felt a strange sense of hope settle over me. "Emily," Dad's voice softened again. "I want you to know whatever happens, I trust you to help me through it. And I trust Rachel too. Together, we can make this work." I blinked rapidly, swallowing the lump in my throat. "We will, Dad. I promise." Rachel whispered, "You should see him during the guided breathing. It's remarkable. The change is subtle but significant. I think you'll understand why I acted the way I did." I watched, mesmerized, as Dad's chest rose and fell in rhythm with the session, his face calm, even serene. For the first time in days, I felt a lightness in my chest, a fragile but undeniable hope. I realized then that the chaos, the arguments, the fear, they hadn't been wasted. Every decision, every leap of trust had led us here, to a moment where Dad felt empowered, not trapped. "Thank you," I whispered, more to the universe than anyone else. "Thank you for giving him peace." Dad's eyes opened slightly, and he gave a small wave toward the camera. "See you soon, Emily. And thank you for believing, even when it was hard." I waved back, tears slipping down my cheeks. "See you soon, Dad." As I hung up the call, I sat back in my chair, letting the emotions settle. Hope, relief, fear, they were all tangled together, but for the first time, the balance felt right. And I knew, deep down, that the journey wasn't over. The surgery was still ahead, the challenges still looming. But we had found something crucial, a shared understanding, a fragile but real bridge between fear and trust, between past mistakes and future choices. For the first time since this all began, I allowed myself to believe that we might actually make it through, together. Because sometimes, the hardest revelations aren't about what's wrong. They're about what can be healed. And today, Dad had taken the first step. The morning of the final evaluation arrived with a quiet intensity. Dad was surprisingly calm as we drove to the retreat. The sunrise painted the horizon in soft oranges and pinks, and for a moment, I let myself take in the beauty. But reality crept back quickly. Today could change everything. "Emily," Dad said quietly, his voice carrying a subtle tremor. "I'm nervous, but I feel ready." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "I know. You've done so much to prepare yourself. This is just one more step." and we'll be with you the whole way." He nodded, eyes focused on the road ahead. Silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, but heavy with anticipation. At the retreat, the staff greeted us warmly, sensing the gravity of the day. Dr. Simmons appeared, holding the evaluation results from the past week. "Good morning," she said softly. "Your father has responded incredibly well to the program, but today we'll confirm if he's ready to continue safely toward surgery." Dad inhaled deeply, shoulders tense but steady. "I'm ready," he said, and I felt a small surge of pride. The first part of the evaluation was a simple stress test, measuring heart rate and breathing under light physical activity. Dad performed each task without complaint, following instructions carefully. I watched closely, noting the subtle improvements in his posture, the ease in his movements compared to last week. Afterward, he sat down with the meditation guide. His eyes closed, hands resting lightly on his knees, and I could see the tension in his face melting away. Each breath seemed to steady him, the rhythm of his body syncing with the gentle guidance of the instructor. "You're doing very well," Dr. Simmons said quietly. "Now we'll move to the final assessment." Dad nodded, a small determined smile forming. I felt my chest tighten. This was it, the culmination of weeks of fear, doubt, and effort. The final assessment involved a more detailed heart evaluation and a review of his overall progress in the program. Dad lay on the monitoring table, sensors attached, while the staff observed every readout carefully. Rachel stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "He's amazing," she whispered. "Look at the improvement." I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. The charts and graphs told a story I hadn't dared hope for. His heart rhythm had stabilized, his stress markers were down, and his overall health indicators were far better than expected. Dr. Simmons turned to us with a reassuring smile. "We've reviewed everything. Your father is ready to proceed safely with the surgery when the time comes. The program has given him both physical stability and emotional confidence. This is a remarkable outcome." I exhaled, tears welling in my eyes. "Thank you, all of you," I whispered. Dad sat up slowly, his expression a mix of relief and quiet pride. "I feel like I can face this now. Not scared, not trapped, like I have some control." Rachel smiled, eyes glistening. "That's what we hoped for. You earned this confidence." I reached over and took Dad's hand. We did it together. All of us. For a moment, we sat there in silence, letting the weight of the week settle. The fear, the anger, the confusion, they were still present, but tempered by hope and trust. Then Dad turned to me, his gaze soft but serious. "Emily, I need you to promise me something. Whatever happens in surgery, whatever the outcome, we stay honest with each other. We face it together." "I promise, Dad," I said, squeezing his hand tightly. "Always together." Rachel nodded in agreement. "We'll continue to support him and each other. That's what family is for." The retreat staff began clearing the evaluation area, giving us a moment to breathe. Dad stood, stretching slightly, and I noticed how much lighter he seemed, the fear in his posture gone. As we walked toward the exit, he looked back at the staff and said softly, "Thank you for helping me feel like I have a choice, for listening when I couldn't speak." I felt a lump in my throat. It wasn't just the staff who had helped him, it was all of us. Rachel's boldness, my vigilance, and Dad's courage had brought him here. Outside, the sun was higher now, bathing the courtyard in warmth. The ocean breeze carried a subtle promise of new beginnings. I glanced at Rachel and then at Dad, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over me. "Emily," Dad said quietly, "I know you were worried about the money, about the timing, but I understand now why Rachel acted the way she did. And I trust both of you more than ever." I smiled, tears slipping down my cheeks. We all learned something this week. Trust, patience, courage. And that sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy, but it's worth it. Rachel leaned closer. "And it's only the beginning. Surgery is next, but now we move forward with clarity, confidence, and hope." Dad nodded, inhaling the salty air deeply. "Then let's move forward. Together." I felt a sense of finality, mixed with anticipation. The retreat had done more than stabilize Dad's health. It had reminded us all of the importance of communication, trust, and emotional resilience. As we walked toward the car, the sun reflecting off the waves, I realized that this week had changed not just Dad, but me too. For the first time in days, I felt fully ready for what came next, knowing that no matter the challenges ahead, we were stronger together. And in that quiet, hopeful moment, I allowed myself to believe that we could face anything, together as a family. Have you ever faced a family betrayal or had to make a difficult choice for someone you love? Share your story in the comments. We're building a community where honesty, support, and empathy matter. Don't forget to like, share, and help someone else feel they're not alone in these heart-touching moments.